Hello. We're going to do some more exponent awesomeness here in this. Again, you just need to take notes, and then we're going to go through 8 of these, and then the game changes in the next part, okay? So we have b to the third power times b to the sixth power. I have no parentheses, so there are no parentheses. So we do not have to multiply, okay? You should not have to do any multiplication with your exponents. B to the third times b to the sixth. Now, got this line drawn, and I put a line in both boxes, and the only base you have to worry about is b. Okay, it's a variable, but there's 2 of them. So the first b is to the third power, so since there's no parentheses, I just write 3 down. Okay, and then since the other b is on top of this line, I will add, okay, and I'm going to add 6. And 3 plus 6 gives me 9. Now, the only factor I have is b to the 9th power, and b is a variable, so I just need to put that over here, b to the power of 9. Okay, my next problem. We have a parentheses here, and there's a power of 4 outside, so I want to circle the parentheses and also make sure we include that outside power. So any power that comes out of here has to be multiplied by 4, times by 4. So the only factor I have to worry about is x, okay? Now it's x is to the third, but like we said, that's in the parentheses, so I need to take the 3 times 4 and write that down, okay? So 3 times 4 is 12, okay? That's the only x I have, that's just right here. So that's all I have, and I have x to the 12th, and there's no way we want to replicate. You're not going to clone a variable, okay? So that remains x to the power of 12. Okay, my next problem, we have a parenthesis, so we want to circle that and include that 2 outside there in that circle, because that belongs to everything in the parentheses. So my 2 factors are 7 and y. So let's look at the 7. Now the 7's to the 1 power, but it is in my circle. It is in the parentheses, so I don't write 1 down. I got to multiply 1 by 2, and that's 2. Okay, now I go to the y. The y would be to the 1 power, but again, that's in my circle. It's in the parentheses, so I got to multiply 1 by 2, and that's 2. Okay, and that's the only y that I have, and that was the only 7 I have, so I'm good. So I have my 2 factors. Now the 7 to the second factor, I can clone 2 7s, and that equals 49. So I replace 7 to the second power with 49 times, and then the y is a variable, so I just keep that as y to the second. So 49 times y to the second is my answer. Okay, my next problem, there's a parenthesis, so circle that and include the power that's outside. So any power in here has to be multiplied by 3 before I write it down. So that 12 is to the power of 1, okay? And I take 1 times 3, and that's 3. And that's the only 12 I have, so I move on to the x. So here's the x, it's to the 1 power. And again, that's in the circle, so 1 times 3 is 3, and that's the only x I have, so now I move on to the y. The y is to the 1 power. Again, that's in the parentheses, so 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, and that's the only y I have. So I have everything filled out for the exponent. So I have these 3 factors. And 12 to the third, I can clone 3 12s and multiply. So 12 times 12 times 12 gives me a product of 1,728. So that needs to be replaced with 1,728. X is a variable, so that stays x to the third. And the y is a variable, that stays y to the power of 3. Okay, and that is my answer. Okay, number 5. Again, we want to circle the parentheses. So any power that comes out of here, before I write it down, it has to be multiplied by 2. There's a 2 right there. Okay, my only factors are 3 and x. Now, there is another x here, but I already wrote that down. Okay. All right, so let's look at our 3, okay? The 3 would be to the 1 power, but that's in the circle, so I don't write 1 down. I got to multiply 1 by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. And that is the only big 3 that I have. So now I move on to the x. Okay, here's my first x. It's to the 3rd, but it's in the circle, so I need to multiply 3 by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And then there's another x, okay? It is on top of the line I drew. There's a little line I drew right there. If it's also on top, we need to add. And this x is to the 4th. Now, I didn't put that in a circle, so I can just copy down a 4 here. I don't need to multiply 4 by anything. 6 plus 4 is 10. So our two factors are 3 to the 2nd power and x to the 10th power. So 3 to the 2nd power would mean I'd clone 2 3s and multiply them, and that's 9. So 3 to the 2nd is replaced with 9. And then the x to the 10th power adds a variable, so I keep that x to the 10th. Okay, my next problem. Again, I've circled the exponents for you, okay? So we have for numbers, big numbers, we have a big 5 and a big 4, and then that's it for big numbers. The rest of these are circled. That means they're not bases. Okay, and then for variable bases, we have y. Now, we have it twice, but I just write it once down here. Okay. So I circle where I would have the parentheses. So anything that any power out of here gets multiplied by 3 before I write it down. And that's not in parentheses, okay? So I don't do any circling there. So let's look at our base 5. Now here's my base 5. It's to the 1 power. But it wasn't in a circle. So I don't need to multiply the 1 by anything. I just copy the 1 down. And that's the only 5 I have, the only big 5. So I move on to the 4. Here's my big 4. It doesn't have a power, so it'd be to the 1 power. And that's in the circle, so I need to multiply 1 by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. That's the only 4 I have. Now, y's. When I get to the letters, how many y's do you see? You see right here and right here. There's 2 of them. And here's the line. So this y here is to the 2nd. It was not. I didn't put a big circle because there was no parentheses, so I just copied the 2 down. Then the other y is on top of the line I drew. You can see the line, so I'm going to add, okay? And that y is to the 3rd, but that was in the circle. That means any exponent needs to be multiplied by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. And 2 plus 9 is 11, okay? All right, so my factors are 5 to the 1st and 5 to the 3rd and y to the 11th. Now 5 to the 1st would just be 5. Okay, so I just replace 5 to the 1st with just the factor of 5 times 4 to the 3rd means I would clone 3 4s and multiply. And 4 times 4 times 4 gives me a product of 64. So I replace the 4 to the 3rd power with 64. Okay, and then the y can't be replaced. It can't be, I don't want to clone it 11 times. That does me no good when it's a letter, so it's y to the 11th. Now, we do need to multiply these two. 5 times 64, okay? So 5 times 64. See, up here you just had the 9, okay? But when I end up with 2 large numbers, we need to actually do the operation. And that is 320. So 320 times y to the 11th. Don't put it under the line, put it above. All right. Next, my number bases are a big 5 and a big 4. And then for letter bases, I have A, I have it twice, and I have B just once. Okay, so let's circle our parentheses. So I have parentheses here, so I circle everything in it and the power outside of it. And I have another parentheses here, so everything in it and the power outside of it. Okay, now let's go look at our 5. So any power that comes from here has to be multiplied by 2. Any power from here multiplied by 3. Remember that you're not going to be able to copy down the powers like you do here when there's no parentheses around it. So this 5 is to the 1, but again, that's in the circle, so I need to take that 1 and multiply it by 2. So the product of 1 and 2 is 2. And that's the only big 5 I have to worry about. Now I go look for my big 4. It's right here. So that 4 is to the 1 power. And again, we need to multiply it by 3. 1 times 3 is 3. That's the only big 4 I have. Now, before I do A, how many A's are there? There are 2, okay? They're both on top of the line, okay? So the first A is to the second, so I need to take 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Then the other A is right on top of the line as well, so I add. And 2 times 3 is 6, so I take 4 plus 6, and that's going to be 10, okay? A is to the 10th. Okay, now my B, there's only one single B here, so I don't need to do any adding or subtracting, just this B. Now it's to the third, but I need to multiply 3 by 2, and that's 6. Okay, and that's the only B I have. Now here are my factors: 5 to the second, 4 to the third, A to the 10th, B to the 6th. Some of those we can simplify. 5 to the second would be 2 5s cloned, and that would give me 25. So I replace 5 to the second with 25. 4 to the third, that would be me cloning 3 4s. And that would be equal to 64. So 4 to the third becomes 64. Okay, the A is a letter, so times A to the 10th. And the B is just a letter, so that'd be times B to the 6th. Okay, again, we don't want to leave these two factors unmultiplied. We need to actually multiply them. Put the product above it, not below it. So 25 times 64 is 1,600. So it's 1,600 times A to the 10th times B to the 6th. Okay, the last one on this page. So when I'm looking around here, I've got a big 5, a big base of 2, and for variables I got x, but I have 2 of them, so remember that. Okay, this 5 is to the 1. Okay, let's circle the parentheses, sorry. So I know that anything in there we're going to have to multiply before I write down the exponent. So 1 times 3 is 3. Now I go look at the 2. Now the 2 is to the 1, but again, that's in the circle, so that 1 has to be multiplied by this 3 outside of here. And that's 3. Okay, now for x's, now there's 2 x's. Keep that in mind. So here's the first x, it'd be to the 1. It's in a parentheses, so 1 times 3 is 3. And then the other x is on top of this line I drew straight across from the other x, so we're going to add. That'd be 2 times 3, that's 6. 3 plus 6 is 9. Okay, so now I know all my factors: 5 to the third, 2 to the third, and x to the 9th. Okay, so with 5 to the third, that would be me cloning 3 5s and multiplying, and that's 125. Now you can also get 125 if you go 5 power 3, but you don't use that until you get all these figured out. 125 times 2 to the third, that would be 2 times 2 times 2, and that equals 8. And then the x to the 9th, we can't really simplify because that's a variable. I don't know what the variable is. Okay, so I need to find this product out of 125 and 8. So 125 times 8 is 1,000. So my final answer, the simplified, is 1,000 times x to the 9th. Okay, now don't freak out on these next ones, okay? These are actually some of the hardest ones that we have. Just take notes, I'll go slow. Okay, now this time I've got some stuff under my line, so remember that. So for big bases, for numbers, I have 2 and 3, but notice how I have the 2 on top where it currently sits and the 3 on bottom where it currently sits. Now for variables, I have f. Now I have it on top and bottom, so I just put it on top. G, I have it on top and bottom, so I just put it on top. Okay. Now you're like, well, what about the bottom? We'll deal with that in due time. Okay, now let's circle our parentheses. It's got a lot of stuff in it, and there's a 4 outside of there. So any power that comes out of here needs to be multiplied by 4. Don't forget that. So let's look at our 2. The 2 up here would be to the 1 power. But remember, that's in the circle, so we have to take 1 times 4. 1 times 4 is 4. That's the only big 2 that I have. That's not an exponent. Okay, I've circled the exponents. Okay, now let's do our 3. Our 3's down here, but it's to the 1 power, but that's still in the circle, so we have to take 1 times 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, now let's look at the F. Now when I do a letter, I need to see how many of them I have. Okay, we got 2 F's to figure out here. Okay, so do your top F first. It's to the second, but that's in the circle, so I have to take 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Now where's your next F at? So I did that F. The other F's on bottom of the line. So if it's on bottom of the line, instead of plus, you're going to minus. And that F is to the 1 power. By the way, sorry about the small print. It's to the 1 power. Okay, so I take 1 times 4. It is in the circle, so you got to take it times 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. So I take 8 minus 4, and that's 4. Okay, so F is to the 4th power. It's like having 8 F's on top and 4 on bottom. Well, you'd cancel them and you'd end up with 4 on top. Okay, and then G. Okay, there's 2 G's. So here's the first G on top. Do the one on top first. That G's to the 3rd, but it's in the circle, so I don't write 3 down. I got to take 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. And then our other G's on bottom beneath the line. So I'm not going to add. Instead, I'm going to minus. That G would be to the 1 power. Okay. And I take 1 times 4. 1 times 4 is 4. So I take 12 minus 4, and that's 8. All right, now I know all the factors. 2 to the 4th, F to the 4th, G to the 8th, and 3 to the 4th. Okay, so 2 to the 4th I can figure out. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and that would be 16. So replace 2 to the 4th with 16. And we can also figure out 3 to the 4th. I would clone 4 3's, and that gives me a product of 81. Okay, but put the 81 on bottom because that's where the 3 to the 4th's at. You take 3 to the 4th out, and 81 goes in. Okay, now the variables I can't figure out, so F to the 4th will stay the same. There's no point in cloning 4 variables, and then G to the 4th. And that's the answer. If the 16 and the 81 are on different sides of the line, just leave them alone. Don't do that ABC crap I was trying to do the other day. Okay, don't worry about it. Those are on opposite sides of the line. You leave them. Don't divide them either. Okay. Because if you divide them, 16 by 81, you're going to get some decimal. I don't want to see any decimals in these answers. Okay, 3 more. They are a little bit long. Okay, next one. Let's go spot our parentheses. I just have it here. It's not around the whole thing, though. And here's the line. Okay, you see the dividing line. You just want to circle the parentheses and that 3 that's outside. Okay, so just in there is where I have the circle. I didn't circle the rest of this. Now, oh lordy, okay. The only bases I have, big number bases, I just have 3. I just wrote it down once. Now for letters, I have X. Now I have 4 of them. Well, that kind of sucks. Y, I also have 4 of those. That sucks too. If you understand a problem like this, you're pretty much going to be good to go. Okay, so let's look at the 3. Well, here's my first 3. It's to the 1, but you notice how that's not in the circle. So I just copied down a 1 here. And there's another 3. Now, right here. Is that on top of the line of this big line, or is it on the bottom? It is on top, so I plus. Okay, That's your biggest rule to know. If you're still on top of the line, you plus. It's when you have to go down under the line where you're going to use minus as an operator. What am I going to plus? Well, that 3 is to the 1, but that's in the circle, so any power in here has to be multiplied by 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. So 1 plus 3 would be 4. 3 is to the 4th power. Okay, that's much easier to do if you just write the base 3 once and then just look at where they're at. Now, I'm going to go through this next part slow. X. I've got an X here, 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 and here. Start at the top left. Okay, work your way on top, left to right. Here's my first X. It's to the 3, but it's not in a circle because there was no parentheses there, so I just write 3 down. Now, here's my next X. I'm still on top of the line, so I plus. And that X is to the 1, but that is in the circle, so we need to multiply 1 to 3. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, I'm not done with X's because I've got more. Now I move to the bottom left. And now when I move to the bottom, I'm going to minus because that X is on bottom. So that X is to the 1. Again, I did not put the big circle around it because it wasn't in parentheses, so I need to just minus 1. And then here's my next X. I'm still on the bottom of the line, so I minus again. Okay, as long as it's on the bottom, you're going to minus. And that X right there is 2. Okay, and I don't multiply the 2 because it wasn't in the circle. Okay, I just take 3 plus 3, that's 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 minus 2 is 3. So after all that crap, I have X to the 3rd power. Okay, now let's talk about the Y. How many Y's? 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 things we're going to have here. So this is, again, start on top and go from left to right. Here's Y, it's to the 3rd. I did not circle it, so we just write a 3 down, 3rd power down. And then I have this Y here. I'm still on top, so I'm going to plus. That's to the 1. That's in parentheses, so 1 times 3 is 3. Now I move to the bottom, so now I use minus as my operator. Okay. And that Y is to the 2nd. I don't multiply it by anything because it wasn't. I didn't make the big circle. The only parentheses I have is here. So this crap here, I just write down the exponent that's there. That's a 2. And then this Y is on bottom, so I minus that. And that Y there is 1. Okay, so I minus 1. So 3 plus 3 is 6. And then subtract 2, you're at 4. Subtract 1, you're at 3. So that Y is to the 3rd. Okay, so at the end of that, I have 3 to the 4th, X to the 3rd, Y to the 3rd. So 3 to the 4th, I can clone 4 3's and find the product, and that's 81. So I replace this with 81. That's a variable, can't be replaced. That's X to the 3rd. And that's a variable, can't be replaced. That's Y to the 3rd. Okay, and that is my answer. We don't have anything on bottom. There was stuff on the bottom, but I pretty much got rid of it when I'm able to do these powers. Okay, those all canceled out. Okay, 2 more. Okay, here's your dividing line. Circle your parentheses. It's a big parentheses. There's a 2 outside, so any power there I multiply by 2, and that's a 2 here. So any power here is also multiplied by 2. So pretty much I circled everything. So any powers gets multiplied by the outside exponent before I write it down. Unlike the last problem where I had some stuff that wasn't really in a parentheses. So anything here we're going to have to write down. Now look at what I have. For non-exponent numbers, I have a 2. You see it? I have a 4. Notice how I put that on bottom because the only 4 I had was on bottom. Then I put 5. That was the only 5 I had. It was on bottom. And then letters. I have some M's on top and M's on bottom, so I put it on top. And N, I had some N's on top and bottom, so I put N on top. Okay, so here's the 2. It's to the 1. It's in a circle, so 1 times 2 is 2. And that's the only big 2 I have to worry about. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the 4. I like to do my letters last. Okay, I like to do all the numbers first. 4 is to the 1, but again, that's in the circle, so we have to multiply our 1 by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. That's the only big 4 I have. And here's the only big 5 I have. It would be to the 1, but that is in parentheses, so I take 1 times 2. That would be 2. Okay, now we have to do those nasty variables. M's. How many M's do I have? 1, 2, 3. So there's going to be 3 things we have. Left to right, start on top. So here's my first M. It's to the 5th, but that's in a circle, so I need to multiply 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. That's the number I start with. Then I go on to this M. I'm still on top of the line, so that would be the plus. This M is to the 1. But again, that's circled, so we have to take the 1 times the 2. So that's 2. Okay, now remember there was 3 M's. My next one's on bottom, so now I use the minus operator. Okay? And that's 2. But that, again, that's been circled. So we got to take it times the 3 out here. The 2 out here, sorry. 2 times 2 is 4. That's the only, all the M's. I knew there was going to be 3. So 10 plus 2 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. So M is to the 8th power. Okay, now N. 1, 2, 3. Again, we have 3. So there's my first N. It would be to the 1 power. Okay, but that is in the parentheses, so 1 times 2 is 2. That's why I do that circle, so I know anything that comes out of there has to be multiplied by 2. Now, I don't want you drawing a bunch of rainbows because that's going to make it really cluttered, and you're not going to be able to see what you're doing. Okay, my next N's right here. That's also on top, so we plus. And that N's to the 4th. 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, and then my final N. Now I'm on the I'm under the line. Okay, under the dividing line, so it's minus. That's 1. So 1 times 2, because again that's circled, so that has to be multiplied by 2. That's 2. And also another reason, pretty much if you start on top, if you're staying on top, plus. When you move to the bottom, you start minus. And now the reason why that is because the tops are multiplied. Multiplication is adding the exponents. But when I move under the line, now I'm dividing, so that's why I'm minus. So 2 plus 8 is 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. Okay, so here are my factors. 4 to the 2 to the 2nd, M to the 8th, N to the 8th, 4 to the 2nd, 5 to the 2nd. So that's 5 factors. That's quite a few. So 2 to the 2nd means I clone 2 2's, and that gives me a 4. Okay, let's do the 4 to the 2nd. That's 2 4's, and that's 16. Now remember to put 16 on bottom because that's where your 4 to the 2nd is. And if you're replacing it, you got to replace it in the same place. Okay, then 5 to the 2nd. And that would be 2 5's, and that's 25. Now remember, that's on bottom, so I want to put that on bottom. And then the variables stay exactly the way they are, M to the 8th and N to the 8th. Now, these two here are together on one side of the dividing line, so we need to find this product here, 16 times 25. Okay. That's 400. Now you're like, well, what about the 4? Well, the 4 I don't have to do anything with. That's the only numerical number factor I have on top. Okay, here I had 2 number factors. Okay. So I multiply those, okay? And if you're multiplying something on bottom, then you can put it underneath. That's fine. So my answer is 4 times m to the 8th times n to the 8th over 400, or divided by 400. Okay, and then my final, my final problem I have here is got parentheses, and there's a 3 outside, so again, that 3 has to be multiplied by any exponent. And And then here I have another parentheses, and there's a 2 outside. That 2 has to be multiplied by any exponent. Okay? So my numbers I have are 3. That's on the only 3 I have is on top. And then 5. The only 5 I have is on bottom, hence on the bottom. And then for variables, I have x is on top, x on bottom, so I put it on top. If you have them on top and bottom, put it on top. And then y, top and bottom, so I put it on top. Now, if that letter would have only been on bottom, I would be writing it on bottom. But when I have a mixture of tops and bottoms, okay, right there. Okay, now let's look at our 3. It's to the 1, but that circled means you got to multiply 1 by something. It's going to be by the 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. And that's the only big 3 I have. Okay. Now the 5, go find your 5. Here it is. It's to the 1. But again, that's in a circle, so 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, now the variables. That's the only 5 I have, so now I move on to the variables. Okay, x. I have 1, 2, 3. 3 of them. So here's my first x. It's to the 3rd, but it's in that parentheses, surrounded by parentheses, so 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, then my next x, remember, I'm still on top, so I'm going to plus. And that's to the 4th, but it has to be multiplied by 2, and that's 8. Then my final x, now I'm underneath the line, so that means division, so I'm minus. Okay, that's a minus, and that's to the 2, but we're still in the circle, so 2 times 3 is 6. So 9 plus 8 is 17. 17 minus 6 is 11, so this x ends up to the 11th power. Okay, and then y. How many y's we have? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so again, 3. Here's my first y. It's to the 1. So 1 times 3 is 3. My next y, that's still on top, so I plus, okay? And 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And then the final y is down here. It's to the 1 power. And then 1 times 2 is 2. But now we're on bottom, okay? And when I get to the bottom, I'm minus, okay? 1 times 2 is 2. So if we circled it, it means its power has to be multiplied, okay, before you just write it down here. So 3 plus 4 is 7. 7 minus 2 is 5. So these are my factors: 3 to the 3rd, x to the 11th, y to the 5th, 5 to the 2nd. We can figure out 3 to the 3rd. That is a product of 27. So we have 27. Now figure out your 5 to the 2nd, and that's 25. Put that on bottom because that's where the 5 to the 2nd's at. Then we keep the x to the 11th power and the y to the 5th where they belong. Okay, and you're like, well, what do I do with 27, 25? Nothing. They're on opposite sides of our dividing line. We're going to keep them. Don't divide them. I don't want to see any decimals in these final answers because that's a decimal. Okay. All right. That's all I have to say on that. Hopefully it made sense, and keep